Hello, welcome to I Am Geek, and this is episode 237. I'm Ryan, joined by my brother Chris and our good pal Catron. And tonight we got a special guest, the most specialist person in the world.
I thought you said that about me before.
Yeah, me too. You said that as
Female.
well.
How about that? Female.
Okay, there we go. That works.
You said that to me too. So.
Jennifer Street, she's world renowned, and also my wife.
Well, my wife's not here. Oh, that one.
She's coming on to talk Moon Knight, even though technically she has yet to finish the season.
That's okay. Don't
This should
give away
be interesting. Jennifer, how are you doing? She's not even here at the house. She's somewhere else working. She's taking time out to be with us on I'm Geek. Can we hear? Can she talk?
Thanks for having me. I am glad to be here tonight. Coming to you from Abilene, Texas, where it was 107 degrees in my car today. What is wrong?
Oh, man.
Happy spring.
Yeah.
I mean, summer's going to be super hot there.
Yeah.
But it was warm here, but not 107.
90s here.
We actually had a nice day, and it was less humid, and we like this morning till a little after lunch, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock, it started getting into the 80s. It was in 70s when I went to lunch. I was like, oh my gosh, it's still spring for a little bit. We had 90s last week, but
yeah,
it was a nice day.
90s there. I'm still recovering from COVID. I'm not contagious anymore. I was let out of my prison cell. And then my wife left. She's like, congratulations on being free from quarantine. I'm out of here. And she left.
Pretty much.
So, but I'm still like...
No one can blame her. No one can blame her.
No.
But I'm not getting there, and I just left.
But I'm super exhausted. Like, I do anything. And I'm like, oh gosh, I got to sit down. I'm like an old man.
So you're back to normal.
I'm back to normal, yeah.
Excellent.
Well, they're still doing construction on our house, and one of the people working here, she had it, I guess, a long time ago, or whenever, I don't know. She said, yeah, it took me like a month to get my energy back. And I'm like, oh, gosh. Fun times. And then our cousin Sammy, she said it took her like 3 to 4 weeks to recover. So, fun times. Don't get COVID.
Oh, okay.
I said him 2 years. We were so careful all the time. We're the ones wearing masks when no one else is. And I let you out of the house by yourself once.
She lets me out.
You come home with the rest.
Sounds right.
Maybe your immune system was weakened.
Well,
Maybe
it was because right before the trip, I had like the stomach flu thing twice.
Oh, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So it was probably weakened. And but we had somebody that watched the video last week commented on it and said, yeah, my son and I got it while we were there too. The space virus, what they called it.
Yeah, the thing is with the current variant, it's very contagious. Although not as potent, right? So you had a headache and coughing.
Yeah.
It's not too
tend
bad.
to lick a lot of things when you're out on your own.
That's true.
That
You
is
shouldn't
true.
do that.
This all looks so lickable.
That's where
Not
Tori
Willy Wonka.
She was licking jobs. She must have learned it from you.
Yeah, our daughter.
Friends of the family.
Yep. I thought Disney World was like Willy Wonka. You could just lick everything and it tastes like raspberry or snozberry. Whatever that is.
Whatever that is.
Yeah. I found out what that actually is, and it's not a good thing. We'll talk about that after.
Don't ruin it.
Sorry, what?
Don't ruin Willy Wonka.
No. Snozberries taste like snozberries. Anyways, to Moon Knight. One of the reasons we wanted to have Jennifer on tonight, even though she hasn't finished the season, I'm going to keep saying that.
Today's bus driver is Ryan Street.
Yeah.
Right under there.
Anyway, she's been very busy. She is a trauma therapist, one of the best out there, and we thought it may be a little more serious than we usually are, but we'll still have fun and be goofy. But in the show Moon Knight, the character Stephen Grant, or Mark Spector or Jake Lockley, which we'll get into the three, has DID.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. Sorry, something popped up on my computer. Which is dissociative identity disorder, right?
Yep, you got it.
And Jennifer knows all about it. So she's going to give us the details about, from the show, like, is this how it actually is? You know, how is it different in real life? Do any of us have it? I don't know.
Yeah. Can you tell us if Ryan has it? He may not even know he has it, right?
Maybe if you're just listening to the podcast and you don't watch, maybe this is just one person talking, and we just switch between the different,
Yes.
personas.
Spoiler, Ryan has it.
Start shaking, look on the show. All right, so first off, what we usually do on these roundtables, Ray Chase isn't here. We usually have Ray Chase on. It's weird doing a roundtable without Ray Chase, but
Oh, I miss Ray.
yeah, Chris said he couldn't come on. He wasn't allowed. So
Oh.
Well, I didn't even know we were doing it tonight. So.
we're doing it a different night because Catron has a big trip he's going on.
I'm going fishing.
I'm going to Disney because you'll come back with the Rona.
I might come back with one less appendage. We are going to Louisiana, and they say, like, when you're fishing, your fish might get taken by an alligator, but it's totally safe. So I think I'll have all my appendages.
Get one of those fishing rods that like shoots the line out.
Yeah.
Like a gun.
Yeah.
And then that way.
Or a spear gun.
Fish with dynamite.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to fish. And you could probably do that in Louisiana, fish with dynamite. I'm sure.
A lot of things go down there. So.
Oh there.
Oh there. Anyways, maybe Chris has DID because his voice. He goes into these different voices all the time.
Like drop of a hat.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about either.
Knew it.
Neither do I.
All right, so what we usually do start with is just sort of our general thoughts of the show. We've done this with all the Marvel shows. We know what Chris's answers are going to be because it's always the same thing. So we'll just start with him.
He might not have liked it though this time.
Oh, that's true.
Well,
what did you think, Chris, of Moon Knight?
Trying to find a way to sum it up. Few words for you. It was good.
It's good.
Okay,
well, thanks for
what?
No, I liked it. I did like it. It was I liked that. I knew a little bit about Moon Knight. Didn't know a lot about Moon Knight, so that was nice, kind of going into it being a little fresh on that. I liked it wasn't a character based off something that another movie or show or anything they've done yet, and it was very refreshing in that way, and it was very character based, which was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good.
It was good. So in other words, it was good. Catron, what did you think?
I liked it. I was confused most of the time. I probably didn't understand what was going on until like the last bit of the show. It was very confusing. And one of the better episodes, like it's the fifth episode, was probably the most confusing. The fourth and fifth ones, I guess, were probably the most confusing of all for me. And then it all kind of come together finally at the end, and I was just like, oh, it makes sense now. But I enjoyed it. I mean, it was, like I said, it was fresh. It was different. It was not one of the characters we've seen. And it wasn't so much about the superpowers and this magic. Well, I mean, it was about a magical thing, I guess. But it was more about the character, right? And all the things happening. And so yeah, it was good. And I feel like they're getting better and better, these shows that they're doing, right? Because when we were watching Hawkeye, I remember saying, this is the best one yet. This is my favorite one. And we were like, well, maybe it's because it's the current one, right? Yeah. But it really, I mean, it was. And I feel like this one was really well done. It looked like a movie that happened to be multiple episodes, right? Multiple hours. If you put it all together, it'd been a really long movie, but it was just the quality was really good. So
yeah,
I liked it.
I liked it. So Jennifer, from what you saw and the recap, just driving that bus still. What did you think? Because I think you the ones that we got to watch together, we talked about. From what I remember, you liked it.
Yeah, no, I definitely liked the show, and the recap was pretty funny too. I definitely would recommend that recap if you're confused about what's going on in the storyline. But yeah, no, I liked it, and I like things that have a psychological aspect to it because I'm a nerd like that. So anything that's got psychopathology in it, Batman Begins is like my favorite of all time for a lot of reasons. I always really liked the psychological aspect of that. So, yeah, and this is a lesser known mental health issue that the show is portraying. And so I think the therapist nerdy part of me thinks, it's really cool to bring awareness to something that a lot of people have no idea even exists. And I think they did it well. I think the part for me that I'm still trying to wrap my brain around is when the god Peace comes in, the mythical creature god, how that ties into the DID model, because that really doesn't fit as far as like just the way it works. But we'll talk more about that. But it was extremely entertaining, and we have this habit of unfortunately watching these shows in bed late at night after we finally got the kids to sleep, and I usually end up missing all or part of it because I fall asleep.
She blacks out like Steven or
I can identify.
You got her tied to the bed?
Yeah.
Well, that's not for this podcast. That's a different topic.
Good night, everybody.
I really just like making my brother-in-law Chris really uncomfortable.
He's been doing it for years.
But hey, I could say stories about when you started that, but I won't. I won't shame you. You embarrassed your grandmother, so.
I'm good at embarrassing my family.
Here we go.
That's Chris.
You know what they say? Just kidding. So no, I like the storyline. I like the psychological aspect of all of the Marvel series, the newer ones that we've watched so far. I think I still like Hawkeye the best, and next for me.
Jeremy Renner.
Okay, well, we won't talk about the last time you brought me on the podcast. He brought my husband, who I love, Mr. Ryan over there. He brought me on the podcast to embarrass me, to share what I said when we saw the man in space for the first time. He said, "You have to tell all the listeners what you said." And I said, "Oh man, I thought he would be hotter."
Oh.
That was
Mandalorian, yeah.
Thanks for inviting me on to talk about Mandalorian. It's my favorite Star Wars newer thing that's been done, Mando.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Is that what you wanted? I liked it.
Yeah, she gave a very.
Did I read the script? Okay.
That was
Did I
great.
Did I say what you told me to say?
Please.
Well, unfortunately, I liked it a lot, but I don't think we have anybody here that didn't like it. That was what Ray was for, but I don't think Ray liked it too.
Oh, Ray liked it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought I wanted it to be longer.
Yeah.
Because it was like only 6 episodes, and I was bummed when it came out with this may be all we get of it. Mm-hmm. That just 6 it's a series, but it's not going to have seasons, and this is it. No. So that happens. I'm sort of bummed because the way they ended it. But yeah, I really liked it. I didn't know a ton about Moon Knight, but I've known about Moon Knight, and I've always been intrigued by the character. I liked how this was different. I thought this was different than any other Marvel show that they've done. I thought that there wasn't an episode like some of the Marvel shows. They've had like an episode, even though they've been short run seasons. They've had an episode where you were like, that was just a filler episode.
They did have the best work on the boat episode of any.
Yes, Yes, they did. That's for those
because it was mentally work. on the boat.
There was, when we talked about Falcon and Winter Soldier, the boat episode we thought was just a waste of time, and this boat episode was not a waste of time. It actually had meaning to it. So I really enjoyed it. I really liked that they sort of kept you guessing the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And that, because in the comic books, which we'll get into this, one of the personalities or personas or whatever is the main person. And they made you think from the beginning of the show that it was somebody else, that it wasn't Mark Spector, that it was actually Stephen Grant. Because we start the, first episode in Stephen's life.
World.
Yeah, in his world. And it's cool. I mean, I think this is one of the few, most of the Marvel shows you could go back and watch again. But I think this is one of the best ones to rewatch because I think they hit a lot of stuff along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the first episode where Stephen's talking to the little girl in the museum about the pyramid, and she put trash in it, the little model. And then he was talking about passing into the field of reeds. And she was like, yeah, what does it feel like not being, rejected from the field of reeds? And he's like, what? I'm not dead. And then he actually gets rejected. So it's like, foreshadowing stuff there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoyed it. I really wish they would do more. Hopefully they will.
I think this one, especially watching it a second time, is just going to feel different, right?
Yeah.
Because you know what is going on. Like I wouldn't be as confused, right? Because I know more about it. Because like you guys, you knew, or unlike you guys, I didn't know anything about the comic at all. So I didn't know anything about the character. I'll say it that way. So this was all new to me, and we talked about it, but it's still just it was super confusing. But now, just knowing more about it, it's like, okay, this all kind of makes sense going through it, and I'd maybe dissect the story a little bit better as far as Khonshu and all of that. So I think that's kind of the benefit of this in some ways, and in some ways it'd be like, okay, maybe it's a spoiler, but now trying to watch it again. But I think it would be enjoyable watching it a second time.
Yeah,
because Carla, my wife, didn't finish watching it. She started it with me and she fell asleep watching it. But but it's you really have to pay attention to it, and I think she's going to try to watch it at some point, but I could watch it with her and try to help explain things, but not give anything away. That'll be the hard part. It's like, oh, this is a good part. This is what's happening. She needs to experience the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, then I can have a watch party then.
Yeah. You could watch together on the phone or something, right?
You could do that. Watch parties on Disney Plus. Yeah.
On Disney Plus, actually. Yeah, you're right.
Cool. So let's go ahead.
That we're so exhausted that we fall asleep watching an hour-long TV show, guys.
Yeah, but
I guess.
Yeah. But see, I fall asleep in movies, and that's the worst because you spend so much money on going to a movie, and then I fall asleep. So that's why I don't go to as many movies. So I identify. It took me a while to actually watch Moon Knight, and the only way I finished it was I was working from home a few days. And I turned it on in my office, and I was able to kind of watch it. And I think that also made it difficult because I wasn't really paying attention real close. But but I did stay awake.
Attention too, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the three. Do you call them personas or personalities, or what do you call them?
Caballeros.
So can
Amigos.
Can I give my required disclaimer?
Sure.
I think we're talking about a TV show, which is fun, and this is a fun podcast. But I just kind of want to say before we start talking about DID that childhood abuse is real, right? And it's unfortunately very common and prevalent. And we know now that dissociative identity disorder is not a personality disorder as it used to be classified. It is actually moved into a different category of disorders because it is strictly trauma-based. You will not catch DID. You will not acquire it later in life unless you have an extremely severe trauma as an adult. It is primarily found in people who experience significant childhood trauma. So I'm just putting that disclaimer out here that if you watched the series and it triggered some stuff for you, especially the episode about what happened to him when he was younger and what happened to his brother, if you are, kind of wondering, do I have some of these same, symptoms? In the general population, dissociative identity disorder is very rare, actually. So, but I want to put out there that basically, like, if anything comes up for you as a result of what we're saying here or what you watched on the show, just know that there's help out there, and don't suffer in silence, whatever your symptoms are, even if they don't reach the level of dissociative identity disorder, because 1 in 3 people in our society in America will be affected by domestic violence, and that's enough trauma right there to experience dissociation. So that we talk about a pandemic, but family violence unfortunately is an even greater pandemic and epidemic in our country. I think that doesn't get enough attention. So putting that disclaimer out there that if we joke during the podcast, we're not joking about mental illness, and we're not joking about dissociative identity and how serious the effects of childhood trauma are. So just please hear that and know that. So the question you asked me was, what is the name? What's the appropriate name? And it's actually whatever the person calls their parts. So some people say alter, some people say personality, some people say part, that part of me. And that can get a little bit confusing in today, because something called internal family systems is a type of therapy that's become really popular and is actually very effective, but they also talk about parts. So when they talk about parts, it's different than when we say a part in dissociative identity. Essentially what dissociative identity disorder is a trauma that is so severe or so prolonged and happens so frequently that the brain either has to completely shut down or fracture. So it's like putting too much stress on your arm and getting a fracture. If you did that and you had multiple fractures in your arm, and if you named each part of your broken bone, that is what DID is like. So to normalize it a little bit, we all dissociate. So if you get lost in a video game or a book and you realize, oh my gosh, like a lot of time passed and it felt like 20 minutes, right? If you experience highway hypnosis where you drive from point A to point B on a route that you normally drive, and you realize, I don't actually remember driving home. I just did it, right? That is a mild form of dissociation. So we dissociate on a continuum. So those mild forms, like realizing that extra time passed while you're reading a book, is one extreme, which is the mild end. And then the other extreme of the spectrum is dissociative identity disorder, where the trauma is so severe at such an early age that the brain really just couldn't handle it and had to fracture into pieces in order to survive. So if you have DID, you're extremely resilient. If your brain didn't fracture, you wouldn't have survived, right? And then along the way, in the middle of the spectrum, when we go through a traumatic event, we can experience other symptoms of dissociation that don't meet the level of having additional parts of us or fracturing in that way. So that was maybe more than you wanted to know. So I'll stop that used to ask me if that. So the question was, what's the right term? There's not a right term. If someone is diagnosed with DID or they're aware that they have DID, they may name their parts, and they may call it my 16-year-old self, my rebellious self, or they may have an actual name for that part.
My brother Ryan. Gosh.
My brother Ryan.
Oh, wow.
Severe.
Wow.
But yeah, so it's really it's more respectful to people who do struggle with that disorder that's a result of trauma, to use the terminology that they use, that they relate to. But there are many people in the world that are undiagnosed with DID, and they have parts that they don't their parts don't even know about themselves, or their alters. So I guess for the sake of talking about Moon Knight, let's just say alters. But
Okay.
I don't want to reinforce the stereotype that it's a personality problem, because it's really not. It's a trauma problem. And I don't want to confuse people who are currently going to IFS therapy and getting wonderful results talking about what their parts are doing. Because we all have like that protective part of us, or that caring part of us, right? But those aren't separate people. And in DID, those are separate people. And, one of my very first clients that I had the privilege of working with, who was a resilient survivor of trauma, we were sitting together with her husband trying to explain what it is she was going through. And she was trying to describe it to him. And he said, yeah, we all wear different hats. You put on your church hat, you put on your work hat, you put on your home hat, whatever, you act different. And she looked at him, and this was so profound, I couldn't have said it better. He said, yeah, but imagine that instead of knowing you were changing hats, you woke up in a different hat and you didn't know how you got there or what you did while you were wearing that hat. And he was like, oh, there's my little Obi.
He was like, oh, there's my little
What
Obi.
he was like?
For the listeners,
our
their
dog
dog just appeared on the show.
Yeah, so that was a great way to describe it. We all know what it's like to shift gears and put on a different hat because we're in a different scenario or situation. But in DID, I actually switch into a different person, or part of me, or alter. And sometimes I know I've done it and sometimes I don't. That depends on how much awareness and possibly therapy I've had, right? Because at some phases of having the disorder, the alters are not aware of each other. And at other phases later in treatment, they become aware. And then the ultimate goal, right, is integration, where we can heal the trauma to the point that the fractured brain can say, these parts, these alters help me, but I don't need them taking over my life all the time. And they can be integrated back into one person who feels healed and whole as much as you can be after being a survivor of horrific trauma, because that changes you, right?
Yeah, and in the show, the comics are a little different, which we can talk about the difference. But in the show, it starts where they don't, where Steven doesn't know about Mark, and Steven and Mark, they don't know about Jake at all. And they still don't know about Jake, right? Yeah,
They don't.
At the end.
At the end, they still don't know.
They
know there's somebody else.
There was somebody else.
But they
right.
don't know who it is.
They kind of ignored it and kind of focused on their problems.
Well, and they may have thought it was the other one. Like I think Steven thought that was Mark.
Yeah,
doing
Mark
those things.
That wasn't me.
Mhm.
Yeah, which he didn't know until later, right? So
Yeah, they know there's something else in there, but they're really focused on the task at hand.
Yeah.
So the word we would use when they start to know about each other, they have knowledge of each other, that's called co-consciousness.
Yeah.
So they start to have co-consciousness when they're aware that the other one is there or trying to take over. So when they make an agreement about no more killing, that is, they aren't able to do that until they achieved co-consciousness, because prior to that, they didn't have that awareness.
So like in the show, like one of them will look in a mirror and they'll see the other version and talk to. Is that something that in real life happens? Like they'll talk to each other like that? Or maybe not so much as look in a mirror and there's a different version of them looking back, but sort of like that, or?
Yeah, so you're right. Usually not in a mirror seeing a different image, unless they also have a delusional disorder along with, or a psychotic disorder along with the dissociative identity. But usually, so before you have co-consciousness, the alters take their time and do what they need to do. And there's usually something that triggers the person to switch into an alter. And most people consider one person out of their however many alters to be the real them. And so if the real them feels threatened, then the alter that protects them, right, will come out, and then the real them doesn't know what's happening while the protector alter is in charge, if they don't have co-consciousness. So once they develop that co-consciousness, then there can be some inner dialogue back and forth. But it's different than just talking to yourself in your head. When you talk to yourself in your head, it's your own voice, right? When you are psychotic, it's voices from outside that are unknown and foreign, right? You're hearing things coming from outside. And when it's dissociative identity disorder, your parts, your alters are talking in your head, and they may have different sounds or they may act different, and you have a sense that they're different, but they're all part of you.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you know a little bit about the comic version. Do you like the way they portrayed the different versions in the show over the comics, or?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't know a whole lot about the comics. I didn't necessarily read the comics, but I've seen the character in other various comics and as more of like guest spots or shows where it's more of a guest spot. But yeah, I do like how they did it in the show, because a lot of times with like comics, movies, television, they say like don't tell the audience, show them. And with this, almost some of the more fun bits were things that they didn't show you, that you didn't see. And as an audience, they left that for you to piece together. Where, and as a comic, not necessarily they would just, the personality would just switch. And like he'd be talking to Spider-Man and Spider-Man would be talking to him, and suddenly the dialogue will switch and another alter would be talking to Spider-Man, and kind of recognize that. But in this, you didn't necessarily see that all the time. Yeah. And you saw that a lot of the fight scenes, which made them even kind of more fun to watch. Even though, like, watching like Jackie Chan and stuff, like they show everything. He's very meticulous in his camera angles and showing the action. Where this was like blip, and like you don't see it, but you see the carnage after, and then you get to kind of piece together what happened, which was fun. So I liked that.
Yeah, I really liked that Stephen Grant was not Bruce Wayne, because in the comic books he's Bruce Wayne pretty much. He's just a rich guy. So I liked that he was just sort of like, works at the gift shop type of guy. And I liked that basically the reason Stephen Grant was brought forth, or whatever we wanted to call it, was to basically be the alter that still thinks his mom is a good person and is loving and everything. Because that was when he would sort of, they didn't really go into all the detail about, well, they didn't go into any detail about Jake, but I'm pretty sure that Stephen would go in, or he would take on Stephen when he wanted to not remember his mom as this abusive person that basically hated him. But and it shows in the scene, which we won't go through the whole thing, because if you've watched it, it shows in the scene the mom comes in to the room as a kid. He goes into Stephen, and then it shows the older Stephen and Mark talking, and Stephen's like, what happened next? Well, Mark doesn't know what happened next. Stephen doesn't know what happened next. So I think when the abuse happens, he turns into Jake, and Jake takes all the abuse, takes all of that, and that's why Jake, we see at the end, is basically the violent one, the very violent one that just will kill anybody for no reason, because it doesn't show Stephen taking the abuse or anything. He flashes again. So I thought they did that really well, how they set those three up.
Yeah, I also like that they used Stephen as kind of the audience A lot of times in shows and movies, they'll have a character, oftentimes like a sidekick or something that gets pulled into whatever's happening, that they don't know the world, they don't know what everything is. So it's like the eyes of the audience. They use that character to kind of help explain things. What's going
He's the
on.
one we can identify with, right?
Yes.
As the audience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. As the audience, we identify with him because we have no clue what's going on, and neither does he. But it's the main character, but it's not the main character. And so it's a nice kind of twist on that, as the audience's eye, and learning the universe and what's going on with that. Like that.
So we had a little like difference of opinion, which I might change my mind when I fully get to see everything without getting interrupted. But the thing, when I asked Ryan, who he thought was the real person, who's the main person, not an alter, and you said, I'll let you.
It's Mark Spector.
Mm-hmm. So the reason
that's the comic books and everything.
Yeah, because that's
well, yeah.
But for me, as coming from my therapist brain, right, the reason that doesn't fit for me is because psychologically, it's actually a lot more likely that Stephen is the real person, because what we do, any trauma that happens to us before the age of 12, right, we have not developed the capacity to differentiate. Like if something bad happened to you with your parent when you were 20 because they were drinking, for example, we would be able to say, oh, like that wasn't me, that was them. They were making bad choices and they hurt me when they were drunk, right? We would be able to say that. But when you're really, really young and trauma happens to you, you don't have that concept. So you only have two choices. It's either me or it's them. And it can't be them because they're the adult. They're the caregiver. They're where all my sustenance come from. I can't survive without them, so it must be me. So we internalize shame and guilt, and we have to create a world where our caregiver is safe. So that's why for me, like we had that little difference of opinion because you said that, and I was like, well, if I'm putting my therapist hat on, actually Stephen is the real person, and he developed Mark to protect him and also developed Jake to protect him, because that's what we do in real life. So if we're going to get a little...
but I mean, yeah, I think Mark developed Stephen to protect him in a different way than Jake could protect him. Stephen protects him by keeping some thoughts pure, and Jake protects him by taking the abuse. And one of the episodes you didn't see, you see where Stephen comes from. It was his favorite movie as a kid, and the character was Stephen Grant in the movie, and he just takes on that persona from the guy from the movie to be the British dude or whatever. Yeah. So that's in one of the episodes you didn't see.
So, but what that to me is in real life, like if we're really talking DID in real life, there's another one who's the real person. That all of these are alters.
Oh, well.
And I mean,
it's comics.
And kind of what she's saying, like, in kind of what she's saying, I can see in a way Stephen being the real version, because it's the version really kind of himself kind of before like all the bad happens to him. I mean, it's kind of he took that part of himself and regulated it to this alter, and his other self changed because of that, but he kind of compartmentalized like his innocence
and turned British
and turned British. Crikey. But just took on a different name.
Not
and
Australian.
Too right.
Because, and that's what happens at the moment of the trauma, right? During the moment of the trauma, it is too painful to be the real me and accept the reality that this is happening to me. So my brain says, oh, we're not going to feel that and repress it. We're just not going to feel it at all. We are going to numb out and shut off and go into this other altar that will take it and keep us safe. And then when it's over, we'll come back to our body. And people often describe it as I was above myself watching it happen. I was outside of myself. I felt disconnected from myself. That we'll have like derealization and depersonalization along with dissociation. So this doesn't feel real, doesn't feel like me, like it's happening to somebody else, but I know it's me. So psychologically, that is actually what happens at the moment of the traumatic event. And if it's a repeated traumatic event, then our brain gets in a habit of every time that thing starts to happen to us, we go into that altar to keep ourselves safe so that we don't, so we survive.
Yeah, and as far as the show is concerned and everything, by the end of the show, I really didn't necessarily think of them as alters anymore. They were all their own person. They all grew their own way. They interacted with each other. Even like when they're on the boat and the weighing of the heart, there were two hearts. So like they were actually two people, and they both needed to come together and fix each other. And then Jake, we didn't get to see a lot of, but he's definitely like you felt him throughout the series as another presence, another person. And so, yeah, by the end of it, I wasn't necessarily thinking like, oh, this is just one person. I was thinking, well, this is three people. Like this is they've had their own individual kind of stories that kind of like merged almost. I don't know. It is the way, I mean, Oscar Isaac portrayed it does such a great job that you felt like it was individual people. You didn't really feel like it was just one person doing a different version of himself. It felt like three versions.
There's a deleted scene which they filmed, but they didn't. They should have put it in it. That when they're in the void or whatever they call it, the white space or whatever they call it, that they confront the mother. Steven confronts the mother. Mark confronts the mother, and supposedly it was from what I've read, it was an Oscar-worthy performance from Oscar Isaac. But they didn't put it in for whatever reason.
They didn't want him to get an Oscar.
I guess.
Like, no, he's too good.
So we've talked about sort of the real life parts of this. Now let's throw in the bird in the room here, the skeleton bird in the room, Khonshu.
Yeah.
Because Jennifer thought, she's like, oh, this is just one of his, altars. And I'm like, no.
Well, I mean, it was like that for a while in the comics. When like the series first started out and everything, a lot of people thought, Khonshu, because they didn't like in the show, you could tell like it's very supernatural. His costume just appeared and he was like suddenly bulletproof and all this stuff. In the comics, he's more like Batman. He has a costume that he puts on. He has a bunch of gadgets that he uses. And so there wasn't any of this like magical thing about him that people would go, oh yeah, definitely Egyptian bird god. Yeah, he's in you. It was, they're like, oh, this is just another one. So that they did differ with that. So I think in the series you could definitely tell that like, there's like some Egyptian magic or something going on there. Probably a god.
Yeah.
That's out of my scope. I don't do creature stuff,
I thought it was very interesting how they did it, and then especially again, if you rewatch it, like by the end, you really see, I think, why Khonshu chose Mark to be his Moon Knight, because he knew that he had these three personas that he can manipulate and use for his bidding, basically. Because we see that at the end, the very end credit scene, when he's like, I'll let the other two go, but I still have the one that, basically will do whatever I want and kill Harrow, which we haven't even talked about Harrow.
I also did like that. No one else sees him, only he sees them. But not just him, like anything that's like kind of Egyptian magical like that, like the Anubis creatures that were running and attacking him. No one else saw that. So I'm pretty sure at the end, even though there were two giant Egyptian gods fighting like over the pyramids, no one else saw
Nobody
that.
saw it. Yeah.
No one could see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
You saw weird lights.
Yeah. So what did you episode 4, I guess, when he gets shot in the pyramid?
Mm-hmm.
Mark, I guess it was Mark at that point, right? Yeah. Mark.
Okay.
And it goes to the mental hospital. What were your first thoughts?
I thought that was actually what was. I mean, I don't know. That's what was so confusing, right? It was like, is that what's really happening? Is it all in his mind? Because there was really convincing the way they portrayed it. Like, this is not. None of this is real. But I was like, but it could be one of the like somebody's making him believe that it's not real.
Yeah.
You know, and so. It was super confusing for me. That was what really threw a wrench into it. I think that was the most confusing episode. And yeah, it didn't help. But it was interesting. It was fun. I'm sorry?
I didn't help you stay.
No, it was one of those I watched during the day at work. So that probably didn't help either.
Not at work. No, he didn't do that. Yeah, I thought it was cool how they brought in for the patients and the people that worked there, all these people that he's encountered in his real life, which made you question it even more.
Right.
Oh gosh, are these just all patients there? And that's how this is happening?
Yeah, he's really crazy and he's making all this stuff up.
Yeah.
With these people, right? There's these statues and things he saw.
Yeah. And Harrow's office in the mental hospital was the room that, like the storage room that they but Stephen and Layla hide in, in that compound thing. It was just all painted white. And then it had all the Egyptian stuff in there. So it's like, oh, what is this really going on? But then you see the room with the sarcophagus in it.
Yeah.
And, Steven comes out of that, and you're like, okay, this is. It is.
You got something on your tongue there?
I got hair on my mouth. I can't get it off.
Well, then at the end of the episode, you see the hippo, right? And you're just like, what? Then it just becomes okay. So now it's starting. Yeah, it's gonna jump back out of here, hopefully.
I kind of figured it was some type of limbo.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Just watching it. I didn't think they were going to go all Legion on it. I don't know if anybody's watched Legion, the X-Men show. It's if you want to watch a show that's very into mental health and superpowers, Legion is the show for you.
What's that on?
It's probably on Hulu. Legion is the son of Professor X in the comics, and he does have, I believe it's more clarified as multiple personality disorder, and it's a very, and like along this show kind of lines, it's very very character driven, very very weird. So I didn't think they were going to go that weird with it. So I was like, it's probably like a limbo or something. And they described it as kind of his kind of safe space or his kind of world space that kind of lives in his head, in a way, and kind of made sense, at least when they said it. And then afterwards, like, what was that again? What did they say?
When I saw it switch to the mental hospital, if I hadn't known that the DID was the basis of the story, I think I would have probably thought that he was psychotic and committed, and this was all happening because of the way that, like, all the things, not just the people, but the things in the office that they would zoom in, look like the things that he was happening in the earlier parts of the show that we had seen. But
And then they drug him.
yeah.
So that then you think, oh, when he's sleeping, that's what he's dreaming about, because he's seeing all these things in the office and the compound or whatever, and then he's just dreaming all of this. And then the waking moments are when he's talking to this guy that looks like this other guy.
Yeah. What did you think of Harrow as a villain, as the sort of the main villain of the show?
I thought it was good. I mean, it kind of fell a little into the trope of Marvel, where it's like the villain is kind of like a almost copy of the hero a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel loves to do that, especially with their first movies.
Yeah,
with Iron Man and Ironmonger and Black Panther and his cousin, and like it's always like the hero and the villain's going to be the exact opposite. Have pretty much the same powers. So in a way, it was a little bit like that, except they kind of tweaked it a bit, which was nice, because he was like Khonshu's avatar before him.
Yeah.
But I mean, Ethan Hawke, I think, did a great job.
Yeah.
As the villain, which apparently Oscar Isaac saw him out somewhere and was like, "Dude, you got to be in the show." And he's like, "Okay, I have someone call me," and that's basically how it happened.
I think, I liked Harrow and I liked how they portrayed him, but I think with this show, if Harrow wasn't a character in the show, if there wasn't this bad guy, the show still would have been great because of how they were doing everything. I think that was sort of the superhero show. You have to have the villain, the evil villain. They could have had a story without Harrow in it, and it still would have been good because how they were doing the Moon Knight character. But I know it's a superhero show, so you have to have a supervillain. That's just how it is.
It brings it all together. Who are they fighting? They're not just fighting random people. It's not Batman.
And I like that they made him the therapist, basically.
Yeah.
In the mental hospital. I thought that was really cool. And how when it clicked and you see the bloody footprints, Jennifer hadn't seen them. I thought that was a really nice touch, because that's when it clicked that, this was not real. Because they saw Harrow walking, because he put, at the very beginning of the show, he puts glass in his shoes, and he always jingles around with glass in his shoes for some odd reason.
It's like a penance thing.
Yeah.
The people who whip themselves on their backs, stuff like that.
But yeah, I thought, everything. I thought, even with the hippopotamus, it's sort of silly, but I thought that was cool to bring the hippo.
Best characters of the show, Tara.
Tara, yeah, I thought that was awesome. They brought her in to basically, Layla accepts her as, what do they call it?
Like Avatar.
Avatar,
yeah.
Yeah. I just thought that
Scarlet Scarab.
She was talking through the dead people to get her to listen to stuff, which was interesting. Yes, overall, I thought the only thing negative I would have to say, if I'm going to be negative, is that I think Marvel, especially with their shows and somewhat with their movies recently, which we haven't talked about Doctor Strange, we'll do that a different time. They do really great job until they get to the end and they're like, "Oh, we got to wrap this up. Wrap it up." And then they wrap it up really fast and they're done. I felt that, I felt if they had one more episode or two more episodes, they could have fleshed out a little more and not just been like, hurry, make two giant things in the sky fighting, and then they'll fight, and then, oh yeah, there's this other guy, Jake, we'll put him in the post-credit scene, and we're not going to make anything else, and we won't really explain that, and okay, wrap it up.
I think it would have worked a little bit better if, you knew there was going to be a season 2, or you knew this was something else would follow this up.
Yeah.
Because especially before the after credits thing, when it abruptly ended, I was like, really?
Yeah, me too.
I
did the
wasn't
same thing.
happy with the ending until the after credits thing. I was like, okay, I'm okay with it now.
Yeah.
But
Like, I
but
really
yeah.
wanted a segment of an episode flashing back, and you see Jake take over in different spots, flashing back, saying, "Here's what Jake did here, and here's how Jake did this, and
Yeah,
this
that'd
is
been
what
cool.
Jake did." Because that would have been cool. Even if Mark and Steven didn't know about it, as the audience, we know about it. Because people that don't know Moon Knight or don't know anything are probably sitting there, who the heck's the Spanish dude? It looks like the other dude, but they don't explain anything. It's just like, who's this dude? And then they're just, cut, and they're like, oh, by the way, we're not making a season 2. So if somehow they could explain Jake a little more, because I do think we saw Jake throughout the show. I think in some form or another. I think in episode 1, Jake is the person who asked the girl out on a date.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then I think, because I don't think Mark would do that because he's married.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in the insane, the mental hospital, when you see him with the bloody nose, I think that's Jake, because he goes crazy and picks up a thing and is going to just kill Harrow. And he's talking with a different accent and everything. So it would have been cool if they flashed back and showed some of that somehow, but they ran out of time. There's only so much you can do in 6 episodes of a show.
I almost feel like, the director did come out and say that, yeah, Jake is throughout the series.
Yeah.
And there's little things here and there that you can pick up of. He didn't want to say exactly what, because he wanted to leave that to the audience. But it does almost feel like when they made this, they were kind of prepping, like, we're going to do more with this. Like, there's going to be more. And I feel like they've only said this is a limited series to get awards, because there's a certain category for awards. It's a limited series.
Yeah.
And there's not a ton of limited series that are made. And that's typically what these places do. They'll say it's a limited series. They'll get a bunch of awards, and they'll go, you know what? You guys loved it so much. We'll give you another season. Yeah. It was just going to be limited, but you liked it. And
I hope so.
That happens a lot.
We're getting season 2 of Loki. They're starting that.
That's good.
Yeah. But I almost feel like we might see him in another show coming up called Werewolf by Night. Which,
that would make sense.
Which is the comic that he first debuted in, and Marvel's doing a Halloween special. Yeah. And kind of Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight started off as enemies, basically.
Which is hidden in the show.
Yeah, which it is hidden in the show, and that's kind of like Moon Knight when he was created was supposed to be kind of like an enemy. He wasn't supposed to be a good guy. And the readers liked the character so much they went back and kind of retconned it a bit. And they're like, oh no, he was just pretending to be a bad guy to infiltrate this gang. Yeah, that's it. Because Werewolf, Moon, like they're just like, oh, people was a villain, but people liked him, so they turned him into a hero.
Yeah. And there's QR codes hidden throughout the show that lead to comics that you can. That one that you mentioned, they even one of them leads to a Blade comic book, which I thought Blade was going to pop up when they did that.
Yeah, because Midnight Suns.
They were supposed to have some MCU characters cameo in the show, and they cut all this out. But it was going to be Eternals, so I'm okay with that.
No, what's that? It's fine.
Yeah. But okay, well, we're approaching the hour.
See, that you guys go way over my head. I went over your head earlier, and you go over my head with all that.
The Eternals is a movie that was supposed to be the next big thing, and it was not.
Just like what actually is really cool to me, I always appreciated movies or things like this as separate entities, right? Yeah. Until one of the later, more recent. And I think I remember telling you, it was like in one of the Marvel movies, all of a sudden the whole universe made sense to me and how everybody connected to everybody, like in my limited exposure. And I was like, dang, it's just so cool that somebody can write a story like that with all really intricate lines that like, do what they do. I
Yeah.
couldn't tell what they are, but that's what Ryan's for.
Yeah.
He explains it to me when I
I
don't
explained. This is the only thing I know. Just useless knowledge about Marvel and Star Wars and stuff like that.
Wrestling.
But
Yeah.
I know you didn't like it, that you didn't have enough time to hear more about Jake, but it is possible in real DID to have co-consciousness of some alters and not others. So that is also possible.
Well, I didn't even want them to know. They didn't have to know about Jake as the viewer. And for people who don't know the story at all, this is the first time I do it. I want them to know a little more about Jake. But
I think we will. I think we'll get more.
I hope so.
It was a very popular series. I really think whether it'll be a series or a movie, I don't think this is the last that we've seen of Moon Knight. So,
last question, and then we'll close it out because I'm tired. Just from COVID.
Tired.
I'm tired of this. No. You don't have to put it like number wise, but where would all the Marvel shows that they've had on Disney Plus so far, where would this fit in for you as far as the best, in the middle, towards the bottom? Where do you think?
So a very famous person said that the brain is for having ideas, not holding on to them. So for newbies like me, can you list what all the series were? I watched them all.
We started with WandaVision.
Okay.
And then there was Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And then there was Loki. And then there was Hawkeye. And then there was Moon Knight. That's all of them, right, so far?
Yes.
Or am I missing? I think that's it. Yeah. There's more coming out, but that's also so far.
Yeah, I believe it's so far.
Yeah.
All so different. It's so hard.
That is a thing that's pretty cool, that they've made all these characters exist in the same universe, but they've made the shows so different, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
This is where this awkward silence is.
But I don't know if, without going back and thinking about it more, I don't know if I can. Falcon and Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, and Moon Knight. Those are my top 3. I don't know where I would put them in. I liked WandaVision, but Loki's my least favorite. I can put Loki.
Wow, really?
Wow.
Ooh.
Oh, controversy.
Asked back, or I'm going to be asked back and have to defend that. And
it's okay to have differing opinions.
I know what my least favorite one is.
Makes it more interesting. Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Which I love those two characters, but the show, because of when it was made and how it was made, I think because of COVID, it was just so disjointed and so it just felt so off and weird. But I love those two characters.
It was good though. I mean, it was
good.
It just wasn't the top one.
Yeah, out of the ones we've had, that one sort of hits the bottom for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say this is top 2 or 3. It's hard to like I said, it's hard to say because they're all so different. I personally liked WandaVision a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I love the sitcom aspect of it. I thought it was really good. Loki was just really fun. Really fun characters. It really started opening up to the multiverse and all these possibilities and stuff. Falcon Winter Soldier I liked. But yeah, like you said, it did feel like it lost something in the editing room.
Yeah.
A little bit. Hawkeye was really fun. Hawkeye may be my favorite.
Yeah. It was really good.
Yeah, just because it was it was funny, it was lighthearted, it was emotional in little ways. It brought in Kingpin again.
Yeah.
Had a musical?
But
you love musicals.
I love musicals. I do. They're so much fun. I mean,
which verse
randomly singing. It's so good.
It's so good.
Okay.
It's so good. All right, so
Yeah.
this ranks up there though. So Hawkeye
Oh, yeah,
and maybe Moon Knight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe Moon Knight, but I mean Loki was
Yeah.
really good too. I really like
Okay.
WandaVision. So,
Yeah. Right, Catron?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I was going to say is Hawkeye, this, and Loki would probably be there. And again, nothing against WandaVision or Falcon and Winter Soldiers, just not my favorites.
Yeah.
Right? They were still good, and glad we had them and got to watch them. But
yeah, Falcon and Winter Soldier just almost seemed like it just should have been a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to go watch Loki again. Maybe I slept through part of it.
Maybe so. I liked Loki.
It was weird. I mean, it was weird
It
too.
was strange, but I liked it. And I liked probably one of the things about that I liked Moon Knight is that, like in WandaVision, I loved WandaVision, but it felt like there was promises made throughout the show that they did not act on. And that's
assumed promises, right?
yes. But I'm just saying, like they kept hinting at stuff, and they're like, "Never mind, haha."
But you kept watching it.
We're just messing with you. I felt like Moon Knight, that didn't happen. Like, even though it was this little teaser at the end, we got all the questions somewhat answered.
Sure.
And it wasn't a tease. Like if they had not had the end credit scene, then I would have been mad about the Jake thing. But since they had the end credit scene with Jake, then I'm like, okay, at least you didn't tease it the whole time and then just not say anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, and Hawkeye was pretty much like that too. I think there wasn't any like teases that just
they were kind of upfront about it at the end.
So Moon Knight's probably in one of the top, if not the top, because I really enjoyed it a lot. Some people didn't like it, which I'm surprised, but I enjoyed it a lot. Anyways, but all right, well,
I can't be not a therapist, so I think some people maybe that didn't like it because it really could have been triggering in a lot of ways. And so I'm just going to get a shameless plug for accelerated resolution therapy.
There we go.
Kind of my world revolves around.
This episode is sponsored by.
It is not sponsored by anyone related to ART. If you've been looking for help and you haven't found the right thing, check out accelerated resolution therapy.
Yes. It does amazing things. All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for coming on. I get to see your face, even though you're not here at the house. I get to see you on the podcast. Our most beautiful guest that we've had on. I would think so.
Get my hair.
But my wife's been on here.
Well,
Did Jenny come on?
We weren't here. It was one that I was not on.
She only came on when Ryan wasn't here.
Yeah.
She's in trouble.
She came on when we went over our Friends experience. When we went
they
to
talked
LA
about Friends. So
talked about Friends. That's the only reason she came on, because of Friends, and Ryan wasn't here.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Carla and Jennifer Street number 2 need to be on notice that they're not gonna. They can't escape it. They have to come on Valentine's Day next year. I'm planning your Valentine's Day.
I think the 3 wives should just come on and we just take the night off. And they can do the whole thing.
Your viewers might disappear because
they may double.
We would probably get more. To be honest. Anyways, well, thank you for coming on. Thank you, Chris and Catron, as usual. It was fun. Next week we'll be back with something new, right? I don't know what next week is.
It's a week.
I don't know that we've stayed on track, but it would be a legend, which we could talk about the thing you sent us about with the treasure hidden across Texas.
Yeah, there's like millions and millions of dollars hidden across Texas. I read an article about.
What?
Yeah, we need to in the hill country. We need to go find these. Start digging. Anyways,
well, send me whatever's in Abilene so I can look.
Okay, I'll see what I can. Anyways, so thank you for joining us either on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. This has been episode 237 of I Am Geek, and we'll be back with you next week for something new, something fun, and of course, something geeky.
Bye-bye.